Forgotten Dreams by Stefan Zweig. The villa lay close to the sea. The quiet avenues lined with pine trees breathed out the rich strength of the salty sea air, and a slight breeze constantly played around the orange trees, now and then removing a colourful bloom from flowering shrubs as if with careful fingers. The sunlit distance, where attractive houses built on hillsides gleamed like white pearls, a lighthouse miles away rose steeply and straight as a candle. The whole scene shone, its contours sharp and clearly outlined, and was set in the deep azure of the sky like a bright mosaic. The waves of the sea, marked by only the few white specks that were the distant sails of isolated ships, lapped against the tiered terrace on which the villa stood. The ground then rose on and on to the green of a broad shady garden, and merged with the rest of the park, a scene drowsy and still, as if under some fairy tale enchantment. Outside the sleeping house, on which the morning heat lay heavily, a narrow gravel path ran like a white line to the cool viewing point. The waves tossed wildly beneath it, and here and there shimmering spray rose, sparkling in rainbow colours as brightly as diamonds in the strong sunlight. There the shining rays of the sun broke on the small groups of Vestulian pines standing close together, as if in intimate conversation. They also fell on a Japanese parasol with amusing pictures on it in bright glaring colours, now open wide. A woman was leaning back in a soft basket chair, in the shade of this parasol, her beautiful form comfortably lounging in the yielding weave of the wicker. One slender hand, wearing no rings, dangled down as if forgotten, petting the gleaming silky coat of a dog with gentle pleasing movements, while the other hand held a book on which her dark eyes, with their black lashes and the suggestion of a smile in them, were concentrating. They were large and restless eyes, their beauty enhanced by a dark veiled glow. Altogether, the strong, attractive effect of the oval, sharply outlined face did not give the natural impression of simple beauty, but expressed the refinement of certain details, tended with careful, delicate coquetry. The apparently unruly confusion of her fragrant, shining curls was the careful construction of an artist, and in the same way the slight smile that hovered around her lips as she read, revealing her white teeth, was the result of many years of practice in front of the mirror, but had already become a firmly established part of the whole design, and could not be laid aside now. There was a slight crunch on the sand. She looks, without changing her position, like a cat lying basking in the dazzling torrent of warm sunlight, and merely blinking apathetically at the newcomer with phosphorescent eyes. The steps quickly come closer, and a servant in livery stands in front of her to hand her a small visiting card, then stands back a little way to wait. She reads the name with that expression of surprise on her features that appears when you are greeted in the street with great familiarity by someone you do not know. For a moment, small lines appear above her sharply traced black eyebrows, showing how hard she is thinking, and then a happy light plays over her whole face all of a sudden. Her eyes sparkle with high spirits as she thinks of the long-ago days of her youth, almost forgotten now. The name has aroused pleasant images in her again. Figures and dreams take on distinct shape once more, and become as clear as reality. "Ah, yes," she said, as she remembered, suddenly turning to the servant. "Yes, of course, show the gentleman up here." The servant left with a soft and obsequious tread. For a moment there was silence, except for the never-tiring wind singing softly in the tree-tops, now full of the heavy golden midday light. Then vigorous, energetic footsteps were heard on the gravel path. A long shadow fell at her feet, and a tall man stood before her. She had risen from her chair with a lively movement. Their eyes met first. With a quick glance he took in the elegance of her figure, while a slight ironic smile came into her eyes. "It's really good of you to have thought of me," she began, offering him her slender and well-tended hand, which he touched respectfully with his lips. "Dear lady, I will be honest with you, since this is our first meeting for years, and also, I fear, the last for many years to come. It is something of a coincidence that I am here. The name of the owner of the castle about which I was inquiring, because of its magnificent position, recalled you to my mind. So I am really here under false pretences, but none the less welcome for that, and in fact I myself could not remember your existence at first, although it was once of some significance to me." Now they both smiled. The sweet light fragrance of a first youthful, half-unspoken love, with all its intoxicating tenderness, had awoken in them like a dream on which you reflect ironically when you wake, although you really wish for nothing more than to dream it again, to live in the dream. The beautiful dream of young love that ventures only on half measures, that desires and dares not ask, promises and does not give. They went on talking, but there was already a warmth in their voices, an affectionate familiarity, yet only a rosy, if already half-faded secret like theirs can allow. In quiet words, broken by a peal of happy laughter now and then, they talked about the past, or forgotten poems, faded flowers, lost ribbons, little love tokens that they had exchanged in the little town where they spent their youth. The old stories that, like half-remembered legends, rang bells in their hearts that had long ago fallen silent, stifled by dust, were slowly, very slowly, invested with a melancholy solemnity, the final notes of their youthful love, now dead, brought profound and almost sad gravity to their conversation. His darkly melodious voice shook slightly as he said, "All that way across the ocean, in America, I heard the news that you were engaged. I heard it at a time when the marriage itself had probably taken place." She did not reply to that. Her thoughts were 10 years back in the past. For several long minutes a sultry silence hung in the air between them. Then she asked, almost under her breath, "What did you think of me at the time?" He looked up in surprise. "I can tell you frankly, since I'm going back to my new country tomorrow. I didn't feel angry with you. I had no moments of confused, hostile indecision, since life had cooled the bright blaze of love to a dying glow of friendship by that time. I didn't understand you. I just felt sorry for you." A faint tinge of red flew to her cheeks, and there was a bright glint in her eyes as she cried in agitation, "Sorry for me? I can't imagine why." "Because I was thinking of your future husband, that indolent financier with his mind always bent on making money. Don't interrupt me. I really don't mean to insult your husband, whom I always respected in his way. And because I was thinking of you, the girl I had left behind, because I couldn't see you, the independent idealist who had only ironic contempt for humdrum everyday life as the conventional wife of an ordinary person. Then why would I have married him if it was as you say? I didn't know exactly. Perhaps he had hidden qualities that escaped a superficial glance and came to light only in the intimacy of your life together. And I saw that as the easy solution to the riddle, because one thing I could not and would not believe, and that was that you had accepted him for his aristocratic title of Count and his millions. That was the one thing I considered impossible." It was as if she had failed to hear those last words, for she was looking through her fingers, which glowed deep rose like a murex shell, staring far into the distance, all the way to the veils of mist on the horizon, where the sky dipped its pale blue garment into the dark magnificence of the waves. He too was lost in thought, and had almost forgotten that last remark of his, when suddenly and almost inaudibly she turned away from him and said, "And yet, that is what happened." He looked at her in surprise, almost alarm. She had settled back into her chair with slow and obviously artificial composure, and she went on in soft, melancholy undertone, barely moving her lips. None of you understood me when I was still a girl, shy and easily intimidated. Not even you, who were so close to me. Perhaps not even I, myself. I think of it often now, and I don't understand myself at that time, because what do women still know about their girlish hearts that believed in miracles, whose dreams are like delicate little white flowers that will be blown away at the first breath of reality? And I was not like all the other girls who dreamt of virile, strong young heroes who would turn their yearnings into radiant happiness, their quiet guesses into delightful knowledge, and bring them release from the uncertain, ill-defined suffering that they cannot grasp, but that casts its shadow on their girlhood, becoming more menacing as it lies in wait for them. I never felt such things. My soul steered other dreams towards the hidden grove of the future that lay behind the enveloping mists of the coming days. My dreams were my own. I always dreamt of myself as a royal child out of one of the old books of fairy tales, playing with sparkling, radiant jewels, wearing sweeping dresses of great value. I dreamt of luxury and magnificence, because I loved them both. Ah, the pleasure of letting my hands pass over trembling, softly rustling silk, or laying my fingers down in the soft, darkly dreaming pile of a heavy velvet fabric, as if they were asleep. I was happy when I could wear jewels on my slender fingers as they trembled with happiness, when pale gemstones looked out of the thick torrent of my hair like pearls of foam. My highest aim was to rest in the soft upholstery of an elegant vehicle. At the time, I was caught up in a frenzied love of artistic beauty that made me despise my real, everyday life. I hated myself in my ordinary clothes, looking simple and modest as a nun, and I often stayed at home for days on end, because I was ashamed of my humdrum appearance. I hid myself in my cramped, ugly room, and my dearest dream was to live alone beside the sea, on a property both magnificent and artistic, in shady green garden walks that were never touched by the dirty hands of the common workaday world, where rich peace reigned. Much like this place, in fact. My husband made my dreams come true, and because he could do that, I married him. She has fallen silent now, and her face is suffused with bacchanalian beauty. The glow in her eyes has become deep and menacing, and the red in her cheeks burns more and more warmly. There is a profound silence, broken only by the monotonous rhythmical song of the glittering waves breaking on the tears of the terrace below, as if casting itself on a beloved breast. Then he says, softly, as if to himself, "But what about love?" She heard that. A slight smile comes to her lips. "Do you still have all the ideals? All the ideals that you took to that distant world with you? Are they still intact, or have some of them died or withered away? Haven't they been torn out of you by force and flung into the dirt, where thousands of wheels carrying vehicles to their owner's destination in life crushed them? Or have you lost none of them?" He nods sadly and says no more. Suddenly he carries her hand to his lips and kisses it in silence. Then he says in a warm voice, "Goodbye, and I wish you well." She returns his farewell firmly and honestly. She feels no shame at having unveiled her deepest secret and shown her soul to a man who has been a stranger to her for years. Smiling, she watches him go, thinks of the words he said about love, and the past comes up with quiet, inaudible steps to intervene between her and the present. And suddenly she thinks that he could have given her life its direction, and her ideas paint that strange notion in bright colours. And slowly, slowly, imperceptibly, the smile on her dreaming lips dies away. So that was a short story called Forgotten Dreams, Vergessene Träume, by Stefan Zweig, published in 1900. I have two other podcasts, as you may know. One is called the Classic Ghost Stories Podcast, and the other one is called the Classic Detective Stories Podcast. And it is my wont to comment on the stories and give something about the author to give you a bit of context, and also reflect on what people think of that story, where it's known from what I can find on the internet or in books. Remember those? And that's what I do. Now, people overwhelmingly enjoy these commentaries. I know that because they tell me. There are some churls, some curmudgeons, some drudges who don't, and they leave negative comments. For a long time, I was put off by this, and now I treat them with, I won't say contempt, but I'm disinterested in their views. So, on whether I should talk or not. And the other really interesting thing is, when I started this third channel, you may hear some jackdaws calling. When I started this third channel, classic stories, classic literary stories, I thought, well, I'm not going to do any commentaries because typically people who are interested in literature are a bit more pernickety, fussy, and stuck in a Freudian stage. So they nitpick about stuff, that is not a verb, that kind of thing, So I thought it would be tiresome. But then YouTube said to me, we're not going to allow you to make any money from this channel. We're going to sell adverts on it, but we're not going to give you any, because we don't think your reading of the story adds anything to it. It doesn't add value to the story. And I'm like, what? My art, love? I said. But yeah, so there we are. So they have driven me to comment on the stories. And if you are one of the drudges, churls, curmudgeons, what other word did I come up with? Probably prigs. Who don't like it, then, the simple answer is just don't listen to it. That's what I would do, honestly. If somebody said to me, Tony, we have a bowl of cold semolina for you, or that tapioca, which is worse. Semolina I can put up with. Tapioca, and they said to you, you've got to eat it. This is a bowl of tapioca. It's cold. I go, I don't like it. And they would say, well, you've a choice here. You can either eat it and complain about it and make commentary on social media how awful it is, or you can just not eat it. And that's what I say to the churls, curmudgeons, drudges, fools. I'm going to say to them, if you don't like it, don't eat it. It's like cold tapioca. Nobody's going to make you eat it. Actually, when I was at school, they did used to make you eat it. The dinner ladies used to make you eat cold tongue as well, and they would hit you. And when I told my daughters about that, they were astounded. They said, that's abuse. I went, yeah, they were good at it as well. They were tyrants, the dinner ladies. And so I not eaten tapioca. I ate it once by mistake. I didn't know what it was. And then I certainly realized, I think I must have been out somewhere or something. Anyway, enough about tapioca. Let's talk about Stefan Zweig. And I cannot actually think of any connection between, I can't think of a nice segue. Let me tell you about him. Now you've had the preamble. So Stefan Zweig was born in 1881, died in 1942, was an Austrian writer and journalist. He was born in Vienna and died in Petrópolis in Brazil, which was a kind of a German-speaking colony in Brazil. You'll hear about that a little more. He was a prominent figure in the literary and intellectual circles of his time. Now, I had a book called Vienna Coffee House Wits. I don't know what I've done with it, but it was really good. It had him and all the other contemporaries. Theodor Herzl, who was the founder of Zionism. So, let's go back. Zweig was a journalist initially, and he worked for Theodor Herzl, who was the founder of Zionism, but also the editor of the Neue Freie Presse, which was the liberal newspaper in Vienna in those days. He was Jewish, and so he had to leave in the 1930s. He had to leave Austria because they would have murdered him, basically. So he before that he went to university and he did a degree in philosophy, and he published his first full book, a volume of poetry, in 1901. But this was published in 1900. So he was still a really young man. I think it was before his doctorate. He got his doctorate in 1904, and he published this story in 1900. So he was a pretty young man, 1881. So he was 20. It says a lot about the story, I think. He then travelled across Europe before settling in Salzburg in Austria in 1913. His life then took a dramatic turn in 1934 when he had to flee. His first wife was Friederike Maria Zweig, and she met him in 1908 and began an affair with him in 1912 when she was still married to her first husband. They married in 1920 after the Austrian Republic was established, and moved to Salzburg so that when he finished travelling. They divorced. They were a very strong partnership, but they divorced in 1939. No one knows what goes on behind closed doors. She then went to the USA in 1940 and lived in Stamford, Connecticut until her death in 1971. But remember, their relationship was finished. He fled west as the Nazis came. He moved to England, initially in London, and then moved to Bath, where he married his secretary, Elizabeth Charlotte Lotte Altmann. He was divorced, obviously. He divorced Friederike in 1939 and married Lotte pretty soon afterwards. But there was some leakage from the Nazis' plans to conquer Britain, which was called Operation Sea Lion, which never happened because of the Battle of Britain and the heroic defence of the RAF. There was a black book there, and the Nazis had compiled a list of people once they took over England that they would arrest on sight, and his name and address was there. So he was in Bath, which is a nice city, and then he went over to New York initially in 1940 and spent 2 months as guests of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut after that, and living in New York State. Again, in 1940, they moved to Petrópolis, a German colonized mountain town in Brazil, 68 kilometers north of Rio de Janeiro. And then, as the war went on, he became increasingly despondent about the situation in Europe and about humanity's future. And he wrote a very despairing letter. And him and his wife killed themselves. His second wife killed themselves after they took an overdose of barbiturates. They held hands and were found dead holding hands. So that was very, very sad, very romantic. And I think he was a very talented writer, as you can tell by the prose of the story. Let's say something about Forgotten Dreams now. So it was published in 1900, one of his very early works, and it's a very short story, as you know. So as you recall in the story, there is a beautiful young woman. She's not as young as she was, but she's still young and beautiful, and she's reading in a luxurious a book in a Mediterranean villa, and she gets a caller who she hasn't seen for many years, and the impression is she's forgotten about him, and but she agrees to see him, and they have a lovely time reminiscing about the past. During that conversation, as you know, things become evident that he's in America now, probably still has feelings for her, has that kind of nostalgia for what might have been, when you're young and you're full of romance. Hard to believe it was so, but it was. And he then, so she isn't wearing a wedding ring. And that's sort of taken as a hint that she's emotionally distanced from her husband and all is not well in the marriage. And I think my impression is that this is either deliberate by Zweig as a projection of some kind of relationship he may have had. It seems to me the great thing about this story is what we would have expected from a lesser writer is it would have rekindled. She would have been deeply regretful. She's married a man for his money and his title. She's living in luxury, but she's not happy. That's what we would have. That's what we would have expected from a lesser writer, and even if they parted, there would have been for a short while a rekindling of all that could have been. You remember our society, Western society, since the troubadours in the Middle Ages, has prized romantic love as the highest thing that possibly could, and it's some kind of calling out of the soul, and we're meant to be together and things like that. And so we would have expected that to happen, but that isn't what happens. And when you read people's reviews of the story and their analyses, they kind of think it did, but to me, it absolutely didn't. You know, he says, he suggests that she has sold herself for a title and money, and she responds honestly, "No, I always loved luxury. This is exactly what I wanted." And this stark admission challenges the romantic ideal of our society, that true love should triumph over material desires. Her clarity and lack of regret highlight a pragmatic approach to life that defies traditional romantic narrative. So on the one hand, there she is. She's a proto-feminist. She's a first-wave feminist. Not completely, but she is happy. She doesn't need to be in love. She always loved luxury. And so it seems to me that in her eyes, this is my take on it, he was never a contender for a husband for her. She had perhaps a youthful crush on him, and she evinced some of those characteristics which he makes large of, that she was a free spirit and a romantic, and like he has been, and that she should, and so he expects her to still have these romantic ideals. But whether she really ever had them to any depth is debatable. I think she probably didn't, and she knew what she wanted and she got it, and she's quite content. And so as he walks away with this idea that he's been in some way, that love has been betrayed, that his love has been betrayed, that he has been betrayed in a sense, she's like, well, he was a nice boy, but let's get back. What we're having for dinner, we're going out to some baron's house for crayfish. I don't know if they're good or not, but you know, I think that's what it's about. And I think the greatness of this story is it subverts that romantic ideal that we expect. We kind of led one direction. Oh yes, the true love, our hearts meeting. And she goes, no, do you know what? I like silk and nice carriages, and I quite like the idea. My husband's got he's a bit of a bleep, but he's got plenty of money, so I'm happy. She doesn't have to see him very much even. And funnily enough, that leads me on to my resonance with that, my connection with that. I'm a man of a certain age. I'm possibly what younger people may call a gammon. And the algorithms of the social media, they send me things that they think I like, that gammons will like. And I get a lot of short videos or longer videos. And it typically goes like this. There's some moderately attractive woman, and she's being dreadful in that she's saying she only wants to date a man who earns $1 million, pounds a year, is 6'4", is ripped because he goes to the gym every day, and has a Lamborghini and 3 houses. And of course, and we see, and the talking head interviews, some guy goes out and he interviews, you know, pretty ordinary women, and they all seem to, in this narrative, they all seem to have these high aspirations, and of course, and then the interviewer turns it and says to this woman, well, you would only marry men like that. Yes, I'm not going to settle for anything less. And then he says, well, you know, why would he pick you? You know, and it ends, and often the commentators have very misogynistic views of women, and this narrative that they put is that all women are gold diggers, and that they will sell themselves for money and status, and honest, good guys don't get a look in. And I think this is what Stefan Zweig is saying as well. I honestly think that this man, he prizes himself an honest, he's a good guy, and she doesn't want him. And she wants this complete nitwit who, this cad, he's not a cad necessarily, but he's, you know, this count with his title and his luxury, and how it's not right. So there is this, and I suspect there always has been. We come to Darwin's idea of sexual selection. So, of course, we have natural selection, survival of the fittest, but we have sexual selection as a secondary process that, if you believe this, it takes, I think I do, which takes our genes forward. And it is that the female of the human species selects the man she wants, but she doesn't have completely free reign. And I think that points out these issues. There's a thing called the manosphere, and the incels that we've heard talk about, the involuntary celibates who are very angry and often very lonely, and they have this rigid hierarchical structure of, and they're probably not far wrong. They have the alphas or the chads. They're the alpha males because of how they look, the normies, and then the incels, and they believe it's because of the looks, but it's also about the financial wherewithal of the man as well. It's about how attractive he is to a mate, either from his physical capabilities, appearance, and also his status in terms of his what he can provide materially as well. And those things aren't fair, are they? People are born at the bottom of the pile for all sorts of reasons, and some people are born at the top, and it just absolutely isn't fair. My daughters, when they were young, tell me they have I won't say who she is, but they knew a girl, and her father was very wealthy, and she was very pretty. She was scouted as a model, but she turned down because she didn't need to do it. And she also went and did engineering at Imperial College in London and got a first-class degree. So she was really smart, really pretty, and really rich. And they were like, but it's not fair. And I'm going, it isn't fair, because we knew another girl called Kelly, who was very poor. She was basically quite ugly, and she was poor, ugly, and stupid. And none of that was her fault, It was just the brutal truth about how we are thrown into this world. So there's this big movement. They keep sending me these things about how it's just not fair, and how and they kind of put all their dislike onto women and say, but women are just doing what nature has set them up to do if they choose, super duper men. But they only choose insofar as they're able to choose, because the man is also choosing. These super duper men, I've had friends like that when I was growing up, and all these women would just flock around them. And they would break their hearts because, and it works the other way, these beautiful women break loads of men's hearts, and beautiful men break lots of women's hearts. It's just the way of the world. So don't get upset about it. But you can do things if you are young. I'm not sure anybody who listens to this is young, but if you are young, you can do things about it. You can actually improve your diet, get some exercise, dress better, work hard, improve your job prospects. If we believe that we can't do anything about it, we're really stumped in life, aren't we? If we believe we're stuck in life and we can't do anything about it, we might as well give up. But I don't believe we are stumped. I believe we can improve things for ourselves, and then you can. But the point is this, and I'm talking to the men now. If you did all those things and you made yourself a polymath athlete, male model, you would probably not want those vapid, airheaded women anyway, let's hope. Because, I've heard it the other way, how men make fools of... I've had my female friends tell me that men make fools of themselves for pretty faces who are going to treat them like dirt when here's this good girl, and this beautiful, not beautiful necessarily, but this one beautifully souled lady who would treat them really well. And that's what I think's going on. She is an alpha female, this woman here. And unfortunately, our man is a beta or a beta, depending where you live, male. Sad, but true. I speak as one. And I'm all right, don't worry. Anyway, so I thought it's a great story. Just to reiterate, I think the greatness of it is how he probably deliberately subverts that romantic ideal. He leads us down the path. And the other thing that's brilliant about it is his absolutely luminous prose that just makes that scene, the setting, glow. And with great writers like he is, I think so much is implied. We infer so much, or he implies so much without actually saying it. Lots of this stuff that I've been discussing is not said at all, but it's what you feel, and that's what I felt from the story. So I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you enjoyed my commentary. If the answer to either of those is no, I'm kind of sorry. No, I am sorry. I'm sorry. Because, you know, here we are. Okay, all right. I won't talk anymore about the manosphere because, yeah, they make me laugh, though. Chads and Stacys. Yeah, enough of that.